This show is a part of the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, an international community of philosophers and seekers dedicated to the pursuit of truth, wisdom, virtue, and the divine, wherever they may be found. To find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Searching with Seneca. Today we're going through the final couple of verses of Seneca's 28th letter. And in these couple of verses, Seneca is doing his usual gift giving, and he's giving us this quote from none other than Epicurus, as we would expect. And so I'm just gonna dive in. I'm just gonna read these verses, and then we'll kind of pick it apart and see what we can take away from it. So he says, quote, "It is time to stop, but not before I have paid duty. The knowledge of sin is the beginning of salvation." This saying of Epicurus's seems to me to be a noble one. For he who does not know that he has sinned does not desire correction. You must discover yourself in the wrong before you can reform yourself. Some boast of their faults. Do you think that the man has any thought of mending his ways who counts over his vices as if they were virtues? Therefore, as far as possible, prove yourself guilty. Hunt up charges against yourself. Play the part first of the accuser, then of the judge, last of intercessor. At times, be harsh with yourself. Farewell." End quote. So I get a lot out of these verses, and this is a similar idea. I believe he actually talks about this idea elsewhere in his writings, this idea that, listen, if you're actually coming to me and you're saying, I need to be cured, I recognize my illness of the soul, you might say, then that's already half the journey. It's like, you've already made that first step that is so vital to your improvement and your cure. And here he's telling us the same thing, you cannot be cured of the illnesses of your soul. You cannot be cured of your poor habits that you've fallen into in your life, or perhaps that you've rushed into, as Seneca might say. You cannot be cured unless you first come to an understanding of those faults. And, this is a difficult thing, right? Because it's really not easy to gain the kind of self-awareness that you would need in order to actually come into an awareness of your faults, and it's not easy, and this is why it's such a, the examined life of the philosopher or of the student of philosophy is it's something to attain, it's something to work towards, it's something to always be grappling with. How can I gain a clearer vision of the parts of myself that are in need of mending? And this is something that I kind of discuss with my clients often, because I'll talk to them about how, if you are learning how to feel when your body, your mind, your soul, whatever you call it, is calling out to you and saying you're on the wrong path, if you can learn how to feel when you're in the wrong place doing the wrong thing, or when you stray from the straight and narrow, you might say, if you can learn what that feels like, and then if you can learn what it feels like to move in a better direction, right? To leave something behind that is not serving you and to move towards something that is better or that is best, that's what I want people to learn how to do. And that takes sitting with yourself. It takes getting to know yourself. It takes watching yourself as if you don't know who you are. It takes getting a more sophisticated understanding of what is right and wrong, and how you can move towards what is right. And this is something that we all have to wrestle with in our own lives, But Seneca is clearly trying to say here, that this is an idea that is worth thinking about, that we should first come to an understanding of our faults and our sins, and that is the path, as Epicurus says, to salvation. And that's a really interesting idea, right? The knowledge of one's sin is the beginning of salvation. That's a massive claim to make, right? Salvation, to be saved, right? To be saved. That's it's an amazing idea, and you have to think about sin as well. What does that mean? Sin is an archery term. It means to miss the mark, right? To miss the mark. And so you might want to sit back in your life and think, where am I missing the mark? And this is something that I got from Jordan Peterson that really changed my life, and I hope will change yours as well. It's his idea of what prayer really is, and his idea of what prayer really is, why don't you sit beside your bed and you ask a question? The question that you ask is, what are all the things that I'm doing in my life right now that I know if I continue to do them, down the line, it's going to bite me, or it's going to stab me in the back, or it's going to, these are not serving me, and down the line, they could really lead to more hell than heaven in my life. If you ask that question, and if you sit with yourself for a moment, and if you actually listen, and if you truly want to know the answer, you'll get the feeling, or you'll start to see some answers, like they'll immediately pop up to you. And you might do this right now. You ask yourself that question: what am I doing in my life right now that I know is not serving me, and that I know will lead to potentially devastating results in the future? Ask yourself that right now. If you're very lucky, maybe you'll get like one or two things pop up. If you're like pretty much everybody else, including me, you'll probably have like 5 to 10 things immediately present themselves to you. Like this, you should fix this, and you should fix this. It's like we have that ability to pause, to reflect, to see what would be best for ourselves if we'll but take the time to stop and to sit and to be with ourselves and to learn to actually listen. And so I think that this is, I don't see anything wrong with this idea that knowledge of one's sin is the beginning of salvation, because you need to see something before you can fix it, right? You actually need to see where you're going wrong. And so this is exactly why Seneca says, that, by definition, he who does not know that he has sinned does not desire correction, right? And so, maybe we would like to desire correction. Maybe it would be good if we could actually learn how to see more of the ways that we could be corrected, not in an extremely judgmental way. I don't necessarily see. Seneca says at the end that at times be harsh with yourself. I think at times you probably should. There is a time and a place for saying to yourself and having a hard conversation and saying, I really need to change this, otherwise things are not going to be good, right? But I don't think that we should always be in that state of kind of harshness and tyrannizing ourselves. We should more often be, treating ourselves kindly and trying to learn what would be best for ourselves. If you're going to leave some things behind, if you're going to move away from the ways that you are, missing the mark or not doing as well as you could, you might want to move towards something that would be better. And so, it would be good for us to learn how to truly desire, to be improved. And that kind of starts with this knowledge of the ways that you could be improved. And Seneca says something really interesting here. We all know these kinds of people. He says, some boast of their faults. Do you think that a man has any thought of mending his ways who counts over his vices as if they were virtues? Man, we all know people who clearly are boasting of their faults, and this is a perfect example. Seneca chooses the perfect example to show us that some people are so far on the wrong path that they don't even see that they're on the wrong path, and so they'll boast, or they'll be perfectly happy sitting where they are within their faults. And it seems to me like we should insert an idea from Marcus Aurelius here, or this is kind of a Stoic idea, really, that if somebody is doing wrong, right, if they're clearly going down a bad path, right, perhaps it's not necessarily that they want to go down that bad path. Perhaps they're just ignorant to what would be better. We all know people like that. And look, I am perfectly willing to admit that 20, 30 years from now, I'm probably going to look back at myself that I was now and think he was completely ignorant to all the ways that he was doing wrong. There's probably things that I don't see at the moment, and it's hard to know how you learn how to see those. We've already talked about that, but nonetheless, there is this idea that, if somebody's doing wrong, perhaps it's because they're ignorant to what they could be doing that would be better. And so Seneca suggests here, yes, some boast of their faults. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the fool who runs around boasting of their faults. And, Seneca goes on to give us really his own strategy for how we might come to a better understanding of our faults. And I really like this. He says, therefore, as much as possible, prove yourself guilty. Hunt up charges against yourself. Play the part first of accuser, then of judge, last of intercessor. So I think this is really interesting, right? What would it mean to prove yourself guilty, right? To prove. So you need to go looking for things, right? You don't just be the person who sits there thinking, well, yeah, I'm probably fine. No, well, maybe you're probably not. Maybe if you spend a little bit of time, this is the examined life. Spend some time looking at yourself and proving yourself guilty. Act as if you are guilty first and then prove it, right? And look, this it's difficult because this is a technique that has such potential for us to take it down a really dark, terrible path where you just become so judgmental of yourself that you never give yourself a break. We always need to remember, I keep on saying it, self-scrutiny plus self-kindness. Epictetus's great strategy for self-improvement. We need the kindness always, but this is a great idea. Prove yourself guilty. Take a look at yourself and say, okay, well, if I'm say a lawyer who is against myself, right, trying to prove myself guilty, what would I find? Let's just play a little mind exercise here. What would I find that I could possibly use as proof of my guilt? And then he says, hunt up charges against yourself. He says, play the part first of accuser, then of judge, last of intercessor. I love this, right? So accuse yourself. Well, perhaps you're not doing this right. Perhaps you're not doing this right. It means to look at yourself and say, yeah, there's ways that you're messing up, right? There's no way around that. Of course, there are things that you could be doing better. There is no perfection in life, right? Okay, so then you might want to say, okay, once I've found some things that I know that I can improve, then we move on to that second, which is of the judge. Okay, well, what is the outcome here? What is necessary? What should I change? How should I change it? What's going to be the thing that I move towards? What's going to be the thing that I move away from? And then it's time to play the part of the intercessor. I actually had to look this word up. I had no idea what it means, but and we can talk about the translation, of course. But apparently, what intercessor is, it's a person who intervenes on behalf of another, especially by prayer. And so go into work on behalf of yourself. Step in on behalf of yourself. It's actually a beautiful way of thinking about it. And prayerfully, call it mindfully, whatever you want to call it, and not that there's anything wrong with prayer, right? So it's a great technique to become mindful, to sit with yourself and to listen and to truly be in that moment, listening to what would be important for you to hear, but be mindful and step in for yourself, and I think it goes back to that idea of taking care of yourself as if you're somebody worth taking care of, right? Because you have to think, if I understood that I was moving in a bad direction, and if I knew that this was going to lead to terrible things in the future, and if I knew that there was a way that I could actually, save myself from this way, well, doesn't that mean that you should then go and step in for yourself and act on behalf of the betterment of yourself? I mean, if you truly care about yourself, if you truly want to have a flourishing existence and to have a better internal world, it's like, wouldn't you want that for yourself, to step in for yourself and mindfully and to be careful in your approach and to look after yourself? I mean, it's not clear that we're good to ourselves. And this is what Bukowski, the poet, said. He said, we're not good to ourselves, right? And he was right. One of the ways that we're not good to ourselves is that we actually don't decide to go to bat for ourselves. We don't decide to step in for ourselves and care for ourselves like the individuals that we are and like the people that we could be. And so that's why I love these verses. Seneca really reminds us here, in Epicurus too, that we first need to understand our faults. Where are they coming from? What are they doing? But then care for yourself enough to actually go on that adventure of trying to save yourself. It's so important. So I'm going to leave that there. I really hope that this has been somewhat of a wake-up call for you, whether it's enlightened you to a few ways that you could improve, right, in a healthy way, or whether it's moving you to that point where you say, yeah, I actually need to care for myself more. I need to look after myself better, and I'm going to start that today. I want you to take something away from this that is important for you. But, I hope you've enjoyed this episode anyway. And as I said, be mindful about these sorts of ideas. Be mindful about how they can transform you, because that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to be transformed through these ideas that we're talking about with Seneca. So anyway, I'll talk to you in the next episode.